Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind. This is a very ingrained tale in Western culture, one that has inspired generations of poets and physicists alike. A fable that can be understood by those who have a life long lived, and those who have only but a glimpse of its pomposity. This narrative has been told 1,000 times, and The Shape of Water is no exception to that. At its core, this film is about solitude. Every character is a reject of society in one way or another. It depicts one of our deepest anxieties, vulnerability, giving someone a dagger and telling them exactly how to tear you apart. Every single character is plagued by their own demons, whether external or internal. They all have fundamentally squashed and contained their inner desires in order to appease society as a whole, but most importantly, their own insecurities. Guillermo Del Toro has once again crafted a very meticulous and vibrant film, inundated with layers upon layers of biblical allegories and ancient Greek parables. Set during the height of the Cold War in the 1960s, a dark period of political peril that could have extinguished humanity with the press of a button. We see hints of this unconscious menace looming upon the characters. Let's take this scene for example, where Eliza is waiting at the bus station to get to her work facility. The horrible imagery of war and violent revolts in the TVs are obscured by a beautiful and calming teal color, concealing the unease and dread of the current state of the world. Seconds before this, we see Eliza staring longingly at a pair of red heels in a store that is erupting with vibrant red lights. These contrasts are simple and obvious. However, Del Toro uses this technique wisely throughout the movie to hint at an internal or unconscious state of mind. Blue represents conformity, just like Strickland's car, Eliza's work uniform, and the aquarium where the monster is kept, and this very scene in the bus station. Red, on the other hand, represents passion, inner cravings, and perhaps even danger. The red shoes, the theater, the red telephone in Strickland's office, all of these objects are what individuate all of these characters. Strickland has chosen this vivid red phone to receive orders from his superiors on this organization. He is a soldier, a veteran who takes pride in his prowess as a warrior, and as a man who can get things done. He has a beautiful wife and loving children. Enough money to have a luxurious vehicle and a home in the suburbs. By all accounts, he has achieved all that there is to achieve in life. Yet, throughout the story, we see Strickland struggle to find purpose once again. Whilst he thrived during his time in battle and rose in the ranks inside the Defense Department, he has realized how little choice he has had throughout his life. All his life were a series of orders and compliances, and now that he has achieved so much, he still has not developed a personality of his own. This is why Del Toro put so much emphasis on the Cadillac he bought. He had very little to say in that decision as well. His wife was the one who suggested a Cadillac, and the salesman convinced him to buy a teal car when he had no idea what he even wanted. It is also implied that it was his wife who had chosen their new home, and that he, once again, surrendered his desires to move out of the state for the benefit of his family. This is how brilliantly crafted this character is. The duality of him at home and at work is night and day. At work, he is cocky, fearless, in command, and the apex of the hierarchy. While at home, he's dull, sedated, completely surrendered to the needs and wants of his family. This, in my opinion, is what makes him manifest his darker and crueler demeanor, which explains the unusual yet potent attraction to Eliza. He attempts to seduce her at one point by being physically intimidating, making Eliza flee in terror, while he rejoiced at the thought of making her submit to his will. In an earlier scene, we get a glimpse of this rather sinister desire, when Strickland is having intercourse with his wife. He blocks her mouth and tells her to be quiet, fantasizing about Eliza and her docile temperament. Perhaps being aroused by the idea of Eliza's disability and her lack of strength and ability to refuse him. We get another layer of Strickland's personality through his religious beliefs. He is a devout Christian, a man of God who was made in his image. At least, that is what he tells himself. This is where his words and his actions start to defy one another. He saw battle with his own eyes and even killed some of the soldiers along the way. He also has no boundaries to his lust, as he attempts to break one of the fundamental covenants in the Christian religion: infidelity. At the climax of the film, where he was at his lowest point, he brings up a very specific parable from the Bible, the story of Samson. He tells Delilah how God had given Samson one last burst of strength in order to bring down everyone who had tortured and trapped him in that temple, killing himself in the process. Strickland is clearly talking about himself in this scene. He displays a very deep and dark feeling of resentment and revenge that leads him to his demise, yet failing to complete his task of taking down his aggressors with him. Or did he? One of the central aspects of the Samson's parable is that he was betrayed by a woman named Delilah, who, after hearing about the sources of Samson's power, decided to cut his hair and sell him to his enemies. Strickland sees himself as a victim, betrayed, caged, and snared against his own will. What if this whole speech wasn't intended towards Eliza and her accomplices, but rather his wife and children, displaying one last burst of rage before ending his life and collapsing his own home, condemning his wife and children to a life of poverty, grief, and trauma, just like he subconsciously intended. Focusing in the grander story, it is blatant that Guillermo Del Toro took great inspirations from classical films such as The Creature from the Black Lagoon. But the roots that inspired him to make such a beautifully bizarre film runs even deeper. The theater next to Liza's home is named the Orpheum. Quite a peculiar name for it. It roughly means the house of Orpheus. Orpheus being an ancient Greek prophet who brought gorgeous music and majestic poetry to the people of Greece. His story, much like this film, is rooted in the concept of true love, heroism, and sacrifice. After his wife Eurydice succumbs to a bite of a poisonous snake, Orpheus, grief-stricken, decides to do the unthinkable. He was going to the underworld and challenge the god of death, Hades. And so he goes down a path of darkness and evil. He manages to reach the throne of Hades and plays him a song so beautiful that even Hades' dark heart filled with tears and decided to give him his bride back, on the condition that he cannot look at her until they reach the surface. Like any other Greek tragedy, Orpheus could not resist the sight of the love of his life, and just seconds before reaching the top, he looks back at her emerald green eyes and accidentally condemns her to a life in the shadows. Consumed by grief, Orpheus renounces love altogether and in the land where once his music filled the hearts of many with joy, now only his melancholy cries could be heard forevermore. This is the original story. However, it has been changed and, dare I say, defiled through the generations. It was Christoph Gluck who wrote the famous opera of the Chronicles of Orpheus in 1764. In his version, all of the original story is intact, except for the very end, where he decides to end with a happy ending, making his wife survive and together live happily ever after. A contemporary reviewer of this opera wrote in one of his journals, "You cannot send the audience home miserable." And so, the new romantic era was born, and the next generation after bought the delusion of everlasting triumph in the arena of love. A notion that to this day plagues every novel, script, and film. This is the issue with The Shape of Water and a plethora of other films alike. Eliza and her companions all confess that they are lacking, and that they are incomplete, and that there's a huge hole in their souls that must be filled by another being. Eliza tells Giles in this rather beautiful scene the following: falling in love through deception, using another as a tourniquet to temporarily fix your own wounds. This, in essence, is the very definition of reckless and selfish, something that millions of us do constantly without our awareness. Guillermo Del Toro is no stranger to tragedy. A few of his other films have ended in catastrophe, and there is a reason that he specifically chose the name of the theater the House of Orpheus. Perhaps his original vision was that of a tragic ending in the likes of the Greeks, yet surrendered his vision by the powers of executives in Hollywood who refused to send their audiences home miserable. Or perhaps this is the tale he wanted to tell all along. Eliza was an orphan, and the root for the word orphan came from none other than Orpheus himself. It means someone who wanders the streets with grief in their hearts and vulnerable to the cruelty of the world. This is a message that we have forgotten, and the more we look at the fantasy, the more we're tricked to believe that we are lacking. Sometimes a fantasy is just a fantasy, and we are drowned in its grandeur. Thank you guys so much. I cannot believe that we have reached 1,000 subscribers. To everyone who subscribed, thank you so much from the deepest and darkest parts of my heart. But seriously, thank you so much for your support. It means the world to me, and thanks for helping me build this community. I cannot wait to read your comments, and please like and subscribe and follow me on social media. Thank you all, and have a good day.